Hi, this is Mark J. Ryan, and welcome to Brainwashing Central, where we will explore through common sense how brainwashing, propaganda, hypnosis, priming, subliminals, NLP, and other modalities are being used to shape yours and others' behaviors. Hey everybody, this is Mark J. Ryan, and welcome back to part 3 of brainwashingcentral.com. And today I got a lot of stuff right now. This is the second one I've done today, and I've got a lot of stuff to cover. Don't know if I'm going to do it in an hour. It may be 2 hours. I might have to break it into two parts. I kind of want to build a case. We're going to get into the marketing of and the brainwashing of the great gay rights movement without a critical analysis of right or wrong about the movement. This is more about how the movement was put forward, since it's in today's news and it's so prominent. How do we go from being a mental disorder and people put in mental hospital in 1973 to where it is now, and what are the repercussions of that? I believe there's more going on behind the scenes. I believe that they're using different movements that have a lot of emotion and passion in it. Again, we sell is a transfer of enthusiasm. We sell by emotions, we justify by logic. And using different emotions to force things to happen. I'm going to give a quick reference to a movie called A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, Bing Crosby. Here's how I remember it. It may not be exactly right, but you'll get the gist. And this is what the podcast is about. Get the gist of what I'm saying. And then make your own decisions, your own determinations. Excuse me. So there's a certain point in the movie where Bing Crosby, who's the actor, goes back into time into King Arthur's court. And while he's in King Arthur's court, he comes up with things like matches, and he knows different things. And there's a part where they start to think he's a witch. And so they're going to burn him at the stake. And so as they're getting ready to burn him at the stake, one of the two has an almanac. And they're looking back, and he's with a friend, I believe it is, and realizes that day is the day in just a little bit, right as he's getting ready to be executed. It may be burned at the stake. It may have had his head chopped off. It may have been hanging. I can't remember what it was, but he was getting ready to get executed. And they're saying, okay, at this perfect time, there is going to be an eclipse. And so Bing's like, okay, I know what to do with that one. So as he gets up there, just perfect timing before the eclipse, and he says, okay, if you don't let me go, I'm going to darken the sun. And he says a couple abracadabra, halakaboo, or whatever. Everybody laughing, you're going to darken the sun. Well, here comes the eclipse, and everybody's like, look. And these people have no knowledge about what the eclipse is. It's new to them, but it's scary to them. And so he's going to sell them on the fact of getting him out of there and leaving him alone. So as it starts getting darker and darker, people start screaming, they start freaking out, and they say, oh, he's a powerful one. Let me go and let me go free, or I will keep it black forever. And if you let me go, I'll bring back the light. And, as we know what an eclipse does, because we're privy to the knowledge. But to those that don't have the knowledge of that, it can be really scary, and you could pretty well get them to do anything you want them to do. I mean, we do it with kids all the time. Sometimes when Claire is behaving badly and will not do anything, we know that she does not like to go into the basement. And it's like, well, let's go down into the basement and check it out the plumbing down there. No. Okay, I'll stop. She doesn't know there's nothing down there. There is something down there. We do have an animal that is dug underneath the house, and we haven't been able to catch it, but neither here nor there. But the fact is that the maturity level of these people was they didn't understand and didn't have the knowledge, so it seemed like magic to them. Arthur Clarke said that, anything that's not understandable can be appeared to be magic to those. And his movie 2001: A Space Odyssey is really about that. It's not his movie; it was actually done by somebody else, but it's based on his book. So Bing Crosby does that. They let him go; he's free to go. But basically, he used something that people weren't aware of. I think about that in regard to global warming, which we now know the records say for the last 15 years we've been cooling. So, but the deal is how can I hijack something to make money off of it? That's a big thing right now. How can I hijack? Oh, this is going to happen. Buy this. Market's crashing. Buy gold. No, market's crashing. Buy silver. Buy bonds. We know Greece is getting ready to crash. It's all confidence. It's all based on confidence. When we got off the gold standard, what's it based on? Confidence. You got to keep them confident, just like we talked about in the last one. When you're breaking the law, the most important thing is to keep the appearance that you're keeping the law. And so there's a lot of that going on. Now, when it comes to using the eclipse, using the passion of gay rights and gay marriage and things like that, that is going to be the thing that's going to be in the foreground. But what's going on in the background? And my belief system and my extensive research, I started this research, I really started it probably when I got down into Texas after I got out of college back in the early 80s and went to a seminar there that just kind of blew me away. People in suits and ties, very professional dress, about 2,000 people. And they started talking about, different things that really woke me up. And one of them was, communism, and how communism in its subtle form was slowly using the left to have social issues to break down the norms in America. Now, without going into a lot, unless you want me to at a certain point, I can take specifics of it and really go deep with it. But their whole premise was they realized that, and this has been written about, and you can read about this stuff in the 30s, that came out from Beria and different people that work with Stalin and Lenin and how Pavlov, how they took this knowledge of conditioning and were able to use it to get people to do things. It's the power structure. But again, we can go back to Machiavelli back in the 1500s and know that this has been going on for thousands of years. So the one thing that they realized that they had to go after was religion in America. Because once people had a belief in God and something outside of themselves and being responsible to that God, being responsible to the principles of goodness in God, that they pretty well would die before they would change those principles. But for those people that didn't have those principles, it was easy to manipulate them. I think you see where I'm going here. So what we have to do is we have to attack what is sacred. We have to attack the Constitution. We have to attack the forefathers, the founding fathers, calling them racists and saying, everybody does bad things. Everybody has things in their life that they're not proud of. But the direction that they're going and what they're accomplishing, they're bringing a movement of freedom to humanity that's never existed before. That's the beauty of that. Go back and look at your history. You'll never see anything like that and what they did. And so that's why so many people vehemently fight for that, because of what happened. So the attack against God, the attack against religion is and has been the number one way to get people brainwashed. Because, like I said, it's just not going to happen with most Christians. Now, a lot of Christians will fall, just like Peter did in the Bible in the Garden of Gethsemane. The job was Peter went over, cut the guy's ear off and says, no, not, used his pride. And Christ said, no, this is not the time for that. Put the guy's ear back on, healed his ear, and said that there's another time for that. But now is not that time. And they did have swords and they did have knives for self-defense. So, the point I'm saying is that if you can, and then Christ said, he says, I'm here to protect you. But Christ also said to him, you're going to deny me 3 times before the cock crows twice, or you'll deny me twice before the cock crows 3 times. Peter says, no, I won't. And well, he sure did. Well, when you're put under that kind of pressure, your behavior changes. That's what happens with people with trauma a lot of times. Work with people that have been in traumatic situations. And it really comes down to, a lot of times, working with these people gets down to not what happened to them, but how they responded to it. It's such a shift from how they thought they would be and how they would act. That's why the military trains you so good, and they put you in situations so they get you conditioned so they know how you're going to act. You're not going to think about it. You're not going to think about it because most of the time you're going to probably put down your weapon and run, but they teach you how to continue to go forward. So the kind of lost track of where I was at. Anyways, the communists knew that the biggest thing they have to do is change the value system where people think about religion and they think about God. And so Samuel Alito talked about today, in part of the dissent of the three that were against the gay marriage ruling, saying, Scalia, a lot of people, well, he's just an old conservative man. What does he know? He just basically said democracy is at peril right now. We're in real big trouble from what happened on this court. It became a judicial branch instead of, the court that determines the umpire part of it. And the other dissenter, Alito, said basically this now means that you can lose your job. You will become a bigot. Now, this is overnight because if you don't agree with your conscience or because biblically you say, I don't agree with this, you will be a bigot. And you can lose your job. You can not have government work. You can lose assistance. You can be sued. All different kinds of things are now wide open because you're discriminating against somebody for your belief systems. What this does is it's a slow chunking away. This one is a real hard and heavy one because it's going to say you're going to have to talk about your beliefs in private, in secret. First Amendment goes in the pot, goes in the shitter, excuse me. It's nasty stuff. But why do they want to do that? Because if they can make you afraid and you're afraid to speak out, of one of the reasons why I am now speaking out, because so many people wait and say, well, we'll see, wait and see. It's not really that bad. And maybe if we wait and maybe it's just, and it's not, no, it's going to be this way. Again, I'm a pattern watcher. I study patterns. I look at how people behave. I look at how groups of people behave and philosophies and what's going on. And we thought that when Gorbachev gave up Russia and came and sat in San Francisco, by the way, where's all this coming out of? San Francisco. Where's Gorbachev? San Francisco. So he goes, he lets it go. Now we have all this energy about change, and the energy isn't towards the Russians anymore. The energy is towards changing behaviors in America, and now we're going to use everything that the Russians have learned, the North Koreans, the Chinese have learned, the Americans have learned, and what are we going to do? Well, let's change human behavior. Let's take control and decide how we want human beings to be, because if we don't believe in God, and there is no God, who cares? It's the most powerful. It goes back to Darwinism, it's the most fittest, the most flexible. People say, well, the fittest survive. That's really the most flexible. It's the smartest. And these people are very smart, very flexible, and very fit, and willing to do whatever it takes because they don't believe in the God that we believe, but they use God against us. They use free speech to take down free speech. They use God to take down God. And so while most of the Americans, they only need a majority of the population, while most of the Americans aren't going to do much about it, even during the Revolutionary War, you look at the statistics and the numbers, 33% were for the revolution, 33% could care less, and 33% were for the British. But 3% of the population decided to fight, and they decided to have and we got America out of it. So if you're looking for a majority of people to do anything about your situation, it's not going to happen, because even back then, when the king was doing all the things, coming in and taking things from people's stores and just stealing and taking women, whatever they wanted to do, that's when the revolution came up. 66% of the people were either for the British or didn't care. We're in that same situation. Go read the Declaration of Independence and see if it's not worse today than it was back then. So, why does that bother me? Well, let's go and let's take a look at Obama and one of his closest friends, the guy that claims, and it'll be in the show notes, that he wrote Dreams of My Father. And he talks about somebody in the book called Frank. Well, he's admitted that Frank is Frank Davis. Go look up stuff on Frank Davis. I'll see if we can put it in the show notes. Frank Davis was the head of the Communist Party in America. He's a communist. He was Obama's number one mentor. Who took over after that? Bill Ayers, social, radical, communist, weather underground bomber terrorist. Blew up parts of the Pentagon. He was blowing up things. But he's still teaching at a university. He's still friends with Obama and wrote his book, Dreams of My Father. Valerie Jarrett. That'll be in the show notes. Valerie Jarrett. They just found out the FBI has files detailing Valerie Jarrett's family ties to communism. She's completely surrounded by communism. Her family. Tell me she's not influenced by it. Obama has all these people. He's got 10 people around that have strong ties to Bill Ayers in the White House and Valerie Jarrett. Valerie Jarrett and Bill Ayers have a connection. So you have all this going on. And we think, well, communism's dead. It fell. And it fell in its original form. And even as I talked about earlier with Alexander Dugin, it got away from him, though. It changed. The end of that format changed, and it was hijacked into something else. And just like with the guy, with Bing Crosby in the movie Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court, they use social injustices to get power. This is not about communism. It's using liberalism, fascism to get power, but they're going to play on the sympathies and the strengths of what communism had. Nothing is completely bad. Nothing is completely good. Capitalism sucks at the extreme end when you get oligarchies and you get people that are extremely rich trying to take over. You get a certain amount of companies owning everything. That's when capitalism sucks. Free market capitalism, where everybody has a chance and there's fair in the game, to me, it's the best system ever invented. Communism, in its utopic view of everybody having things equal and shared and everything, it's got some great points. But again, I'm a capitalist. I'm not a extreme capitalist. I do not like what happens on that end of capitalism, and I don't like what happens on the other end of communism. But when you take socialist, and Lenin said basically socialism is the first step on the route to communism. They invented socialism to get you closer to communism. So what do we have here? And I'm looking at a deer going through my backyard. Pretty cool. So what do they want to do? What happened? What Dugin says is basically liberalism got away from them, and instead of a community value system, it turned into an individual value system of power and selfishness. And that's now, which then goes into fascism, which then scares them. So the people that started this and got this thing rolling, it's been hijacked. There's a great series of videos called Century of Self. I highly recommend you watch it. It's about 4 hours long, and it talks about how we get into the self. Well, the American system was set up to be self, but it was set up as a brotherhood. It was set up to be independent people in a dependent situation. We realized we were dependent on each other for certain things. Beyond that, we're an independent system. The communist version was more dependency with a little bit of independency, but it was hijacked in a different way. So now what do we have? We've got a bunch of communists not of the old type, but of the new type that we can't really call communism. We got to call it liberalism. Okay, that the Russians and the Chinese and other communists around the world are afraid of. Why? Because they really know it's fascism. It's a new type of fascism that scares everybody. So most of the world is not celebrating this gay marriage ruling. They're petrified. Again, they see the United States as the number one threat to world peace. So what does this have to do with what's going on now? Well, let's talk about how they're using issues, and we're going to get into it again in a minute. I keep saying in a minute. It's been a long time, but it's like building up a case, and I'm doing the best I can. So when you get this information, you're going to have a better idea of what's happening. But let me go to. I've got something pulled up on my screen here that I want to read you just a little bit of, and let's see if I can find that. But it basically is about an undercover FBI agent that was part of the Weather Underground. He was an undercover FBI agent, and he was with that group of people back then when they were bombing and they were talking about taking over America and how they were going to take over in the 60s. And he was an undercover FBI agent that went in there, and they thought his specialty was bombing. So they liked the idea that he was getting in there. And it really got to him. And afterward, he talked about his experience and what was going on in these conversations. And he said the people in the room were all graduate people that had been through graduate school. And there's 25 of them, and the stuff that they were talking about. He says, these were Columbia, Harvard, Ivy League graduates that were involved with the Weather Underground and Bill Ayers in this movement, and him being an undercover FBI agent. So here's part of what he said. His name was, I can't remember his first name, but Grathwall is his last name. He says, I brought up the subject of what's going to happen after we take over the government. We become responsible for administrating, 250 million people. Well, that's what the population was back then. And he said there was no answer. No one had given any thought to economics. So that's pretty intense in itself. And we're going to get into critical theory, which is how to tear down something, which was a system that was supposed to be working from the Frankfurt School and helping with communism. But they found out half the equation. The critical theory worked amazing for tearing systems down, but they didn't have anything to go along with it. And that's kind of like what's happening here. There are a group of radicals that know how to tear down something, but nobody had given any thought about what if they win? And what if they do this? 250 million people, and there was no answer. No one had given any thought to economics. How are you going to clothe and feed these people, he said. The only thing that I could get was that they expected that the Cubans, the North Vietnamese, the Chinese, and the Russians would all want to occupy different positions in portions of the United States. Let that sit for just a second. They were just going to let the Cubans, the North Vietnamese, the Chinese, and the Russians would all want to occupy different portions of the United States. They also believed that their immediate responsibility would be to protect against what they called the counter-revolution. So they're counter-revolutionaries, but they're imagining taking over the country, and they realize there's going to be counter-revolutionaries, people that aren't going to put up with this, people that are going to fight against this, right? Are you a counter-revolutionary to them? He said, and they felt that the counter-revolution would best be guarded against by creating and establishing re-education camps in the Southwest where we could take all of the people who needed to be re-educated. Get this? What are they trying to do to us right now? Re-educate you. And if you're not re-educated in the way they want you to be re-educated, you're a bigot. And if you don't like that, there's nowhere for you to run to hide because all their friends at Google and Facebook and Apple and Amazon, well, they're going to do something to flag it out to let you know that. So when you go to a job, if it's with them, the companies that are making the money, the companies that are doing things that have anything to support the economy, you're not allowed into it. Oh, well, you'll just have to suffer and find your own way. But we've made all kinds of laws through the EPA and the FDA and all these other, you're not allowed to grow or to go to certain areas, and you're not going to be able to survive. So this is part of what they're talking about with the Agenda 21. You think, oh, this is all conspiracy stuff. Yeah, keep thinking that way. They got you conditioned to believe that the condition. Let's talk about the boy that cried wolf for a second. The boy that cried wolf, he kept coming up, there's a wolf, and he was doing it, joking around, and he got to the point where nobody listened to him anymore because the boy that cried wolf. But then the wolf came, and he's like, no, really, it's the wolf, and they all laughed. And the wolf was to take over. Part of the plan, again, these people are not stupid. They know what the things are. There's nothing that they haven't thought about. The New Age movement, the white hats are coming. There's people in government that are the white hat. There's the new dimension. The UFOs are here to save us. They know that there's evil and stuff going on. And what does it do? It forces you not to have and take any action. It forces you to believe that something bigger is going to come and take action. Our forefathers believed that there was something bigger, but they still went and they took action about it. So the re-education, we'll go back to what he was saying because there's only a couple more lines. Well, he says they were going to re-educate people into a new way of thinking and teach them things that the way things were going to be. I asked, well, what's going to happen to those people that we can't re-educate? Remember I told you about the Christians? They're not going to change their beliefs. The God-fearing people, there's going to be some of them are going to fight to the end. And based on a country of 250 million with 80, 90% at the time, probably 90% of the time were Christians, it's still about 75%. That's a huge chunk of people. So now we're talking, again, back in the 60s, so it was 250 million people. Well, what's going to happen to those people that we can't re-educate and are diehard capitalists, capitalist Christians? And the reply was that they'd have to be eliminated. Remember, this is Bel Air's group of 25 highly educated graduate people from Ivy League colleges that are now in power in the United States of America. There's something called conscious parallelism. They want to call it conspiracy. But let's say me and you and a couple other people were out there, and we don't want to have a conspiracy, but we all have the same beliefs. If we do everything that we possibly can to help each other attain that goal without having to communicate with each other, that's called conscious parallelism. If you look today, you'll see all these stores that have taken down the Confederate flag, that aren't going to sell the Confederate flag anymore. Flag companies, all these people falling like dominoes. That's all been prepared ahead of time. That's conscious parallelism. It's not a conspiracy because you can't connect these people together. But conscious parallelism is just as dangerous, if not worse, because there is no way that they've thought this out beautifully. You know, they prepare it ahead of time to get people to think in certain ways so that there's question, there's doubt. They put doubt in your mind, into your thoughts of what you know is right. And they put. I had a lawyer one time that I was training in a hypnosis seminar years ago, and he kept wanting to know about all this seduction stuff and how to manipulate women and everything like that. And he wanted to trade and buy stuff from me to teach him that. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. That's not what I'm about. I said, I can teach you how to be a better person that'll attract more women in your life, but I'm not going to give you specific techniques and come on and da-da-da, and you owe me, you said you'd give me some consultation, and he was a lawyer, hit me hard. But I watched his presentation, and he was good at it, and his specialty was drunk driving. And he may be listening to this now, and I'm not going to mention your name. But he brought forth the case, and he said, here's the evidence. And after he gave you the evidence, you're like, absolutely, this guy was drunk driving. And I can't remember if he caused an accident or not, but he was absolutely drunk driving. And there was no question in your mind. But he goes, my job as a attorney for this client is to bring doubt into the minds beyond a reasonable doubt. Beyond a reasonable doubt. And all they have to do, you can still have doubt, but as long as it's not a reasonable doubt, a reasonable doubt, then you can still say, no, this guy was driving drunk. But what he did during his presentation was use these hypnotic principles to then take you through a process. And by the end of it, he had me doubting, and I'm going like, this is powerful. This is powerful, because he said, okay, based on the case law here, you have to look at it this way, based on the case law here. And so little elements of doubt. And so as a jurist, you have to go, which we were in the audience, we have to go, can I convict this guy? Do I have enough doubt? Do I have enough reasonable doubt to say, I got to find him not guilty? Or do I know deep down? So this technology is being used by lawyers, it's being used by the court, it's being used by the media. On the media, all these people had to say they're sorry recently about Hillary Clinton or Obama, where they said Michael Gruber, who was a New York Times, said that no, he didn't have anything to do with the implementation of Obamacare. That's the guy that called American people stupid idiots, and we have to use these techniques, these brainwashing techniques, basically, to get this by them because they can't understand it themselves. They're basically idiots, and so they're using this technique. And they said because of that, they're saying, isn't he part of this? And the White House lied. Well, they just found out, yep, he was part. He was very instrumental in Obamacare, and the guy that called you idiots, Americans idiots, and they had to go on these TV shows. And one guy said, yeah, he goes, I was wrong. He goes, I got fooled. And he goes, they lied. They outright lied. And the other people was like, well, they misspoke. Well, lied and misspoke. Does that put a little doubt in there? So they're experts at this. They're experts at this information. And again, when we're going to get into in probably more than a minute, this book and what's happening, you're going to get a sense of how specifically they're doing this. So I'll go back to finish up this last line of what they're talking about. So what are we going to do about these diehard capitalists, Christians? And the reply was that they'd have to be eliminated. And when I pursued this further, this is the FBI undercover agent, when I pursued this further, they estimated that they'd have to eliminate 25 million people. Think about that. How many did Stalin eliminate? How many Ukrainians were killed? How many Jews were killed? How many Romanians and Gypsies were killed? How many people that were mentally disabled, retarded? How many people did Mao's China kill in the name of communism? They're figuring about 180 million people within the last 100 or so years. 180 million people. So 25 million people, well, that's just a small fraction of 25 million American people, American Christians, American capitalists, free market capitalists. Kill them in these re-education centers. And when I say eliminate, I mean kill 25 million people. I want you to imagine sitting in a room with 25 people, most who have graduate degrees from Columbia and other well-known education centers, and hear them figuring out the logistics for the elimination of 25 million people, and they were dead serious. So when Alito talks about the fact that you're going to be called a bigot and you've got younger population. We know about the who's the Pied Piper. The Pied Piper tried to get the parents. The parents wouldn't go for it. They had some kind of a contract, and so the Pied Piper whistled and took their kids. Didn't care about the parents. But look at the generation that's coming up. If you can keep a level of people immature, teenagers, uncertain, not convicted, because most of these people they're talking about were older people, convicted people that had thought about, people that could think about more than their emotions, get past their emotions, and know that there were deeper principles. So when their emotions came up, they might act, but they would still know that there's something deeper than that going on. If you take away the deeper principles, the deeper value system, you can move a nation by emotions. Because that's how it works when you sell. I mean, I have deeper principles and still have been moved by emotions, different ways. But those deeper principles bring me back. So when you have politicians and business leaders in the government and in the world, and they know these techniques, but they don't believe in a higher power, or the people that are in these positions, who I think, basically Roberts with his decision on Obamacare, but also Kennedy and I can't remember who the other guy was that went over on the Supreme Court. You don't need all of them. You only need to have one or two. If somebody has an allergy to peanuts, most people can eat peanuts and not be affected by it. But if you want to prove a case, if I can find everybody that's allergic to peanuts and fill the courtroom up, and then have everybody eat peanuts and watch them go through all kinds of shock, anaphylactic shock, whatever it is that they go into I can convince you that, oh my God, a lot of people are allergic, and I might be allergic, and I better stop eating peanuts or peanut butter because I've stacked the deck, which is like the astroturfing, to make you believe or to make you doubt what you know and to make you believe something new. So if you take away the idea of conscience, a higher consciousness, again, the whole purpose of what I'm doing is to then introduce to higher consciousness. What is higher consciousness? And you have to know that. You have to experience it. If you just believe it, you get into a pressure situation and you'll change your belief. That's what a lot of people, again, traumatic experience, and they behave in a different way against what they thought they were going to behave. And what happens? They're traumatized by the fact of how they acted, and they need help for that cognitive dissonance, the separation between how they thought they were going to act and how they really did. When it becomes really big, it traumatizes people, and that is part of what has to be worked out, is that trauma between the cognitive dissonance of who they thought they were and who they behaved as they were. But when you have a different belief system, I just watched a movie that was pretty violent yesterday, I think it was. Kathy took the kids up to the lake to go swimming. And so I stayed, and it was hotter than the dickens. And I just laid on the couch with just my underwear on and stuck a movie on, and it was called Seven Psychopaths. And one of the guys that was the Seven Psychopaths was Christopher Walken's character. And he was an old Amish guy that kind of, excuse me, he was kind of on the edge, but he still held on to these deep beliefs. And at one point, they were going to get shot, and they had the guns to the head, and he'd already gotten knocked around a little bit. And this other guy, it was Colin Farrell, I think it was. And he starts whining and crying like a little baby, and Christopher Walken kind of says, "Cut your whining out. Don't you believe in the Lord Jesus Christ and where you're going afterwards?" He goes, "This is not." And so he's standing there, and of course it's a movie, but he's standing there not phasing, and they're going like, "Do this and do that." He goes, "No." He goes, "Why aren't you going to do it?" "Because I don't want to." And they don't know what to do. They're like, "This guy's not afraid of anything." Why? Because he had the higher consciousness and the belief, and he'd been through a lot in his life. One of them was his daughter getting killed and his wife getting killed, and he knew they were on the other side, and he didn't care. He had a belief that there was something there. But the other guy would say, "Just tell me what to do. I'll do anything. I'll do anything." Well, they moved him emotionally. The other guy was like, "No, sorry. Do what you need to do. I'm here. I'm not doing what you want to do anymore. I'm going to do what I want." "Well, move over here, and I'm going to blow your head up." "Do it. Hell, come on. What's your hurry? Do it. Are you a pussy?" I mean, so I don't recommend you watch the movie. It's pretty violent, unless you like violent. It was really violent. But that, to me alone, was worth watching it, because it really showed, even though it was acting, and I know people like this, they are not going to move. So it's not about getting them to move. It's about getting the kids and the younger generation and everybody that doesn't believe in that hasn't carried through, get them to move, and they will authorize the military or whoever else to then do what this guy says, eliminate 25 million people. So if you say 250, now we're up to 320, that's an additional 75 million. Do the calculations, it's probably closer to 40 to 50 million people, maybe more, maybe less, because of the viewpoints. Am I crazy? I don't know. Maybe I am. Maybe I am crazy. But I got to tell you, I watch patterns and been watching them for years and years and years. And if you look throughout history, you'll see these exact same patterns appearing with different names on them, with different people. The question is, if you could go back and you knew what Hitler was going to do, if you could go back in time and you had a chance to have a gun and kill him, would you kill him? If you knew Stalin, what he was going to do to all those people, and you could go back in history and you had an opportunity to use that gun and to kill him, would you? How about Mao? Well, we're at a certain point right now, and I'm not saying we're exactly there, but we're really close to this thing tipping. And then I believe yesterday and the day before was a tipping point, not because of the issues, not because I don't want health care for people. I want health care for people. I want everybody to have health care. I don't want to see homeless people. People want to be in union that are gay. That's fine. Just don't put it in my face. I don't. And if you're around and you're holding hands in public, that's fine. Normal couples do that as well. But don't put your agenda on me. Don't try to shut me up. Don't try to call me a bigot and everything else like that. You do your thing. I'll do my thing. So that's kind of the roundabout. And I'm looking, wow, we're already that far into that. So my concern is that we've had all kinds of evidence that Obama's surrounded by the new communist liberalism, that liberalism has won the court, that the court has changed, that Obama's writing laws, that people let's go back to the dossiers. It only takes about 600 people, to the Congress and the Senate, the president, and 9 judicial activists on the court have a little bit of blackmail material on them or material that can persuade them or hypnotize them. Who knows how somnambulistic these people are? The more hypnotizable somebody is, usually has a direct correlation with their intelligence. Patty Hearst, the people that were with Charles Manson, all extremely intelligent people. Usually people that aren't as smart are the harder to be hypnotized and to move, to change their value system. But the ones that are more intelligent, there's an easy way. That's why these intellectuals are easy to capture. With concepts and ideas, you can gradually take them over and move them around, playing with the value systems. And if they don't have a higher belief system to keep them in check, to keep them in line, what do you have? You have a criminality. You get to the point where the toughest, most flexible person is going to rule the system. It's not going to be a donut-shaped system like our Constitution was without a hierarchy. We had people that were there that meant to make sure that nobody did anything. The hierarchy was, as servants, they would serve us to make sure that this thing was run the way it was supposed to run. But then you let bankers in, and you let people with psychological, and what's going on with Hollywood. Why is Hollywood so left? Why did McCarthy go after them, say they're communists? And then, his way of doing things wasn't that smart because it turned people off. But he was on the right path. He exposed a lot of people in Hollywood that were communists and using that to change people's value systems. And what better way to do that than the media? And I'm talking about magazine media. I'm talking about internet media. I'm talking about cable news. I'm talking about Hollywood movies. We will get into that. We will get into that, how that is used to put doubt in your mind about your belief systems. So when they come to take action, you're frozen in doubt. There's fight, flight, and freeze. They don't talk about freeze because they're using freeze. They want freeze. They don't want you to fight. They don't want you to run away. They want you to freeze. And what is being used against you is freeze. It's the thing where the possum plays dead. A lot of times when animals freeze, what they do is they emit a certain chemical in their body. That's why a lot of times if an animal they'll go after live prey, because when they freeze and they go into that dead place, there's something that doesn't taste good to animals, and they'll drop the prey a lot of times, and they won't eat it. But if they catch a live prey that's got adrenaline running through it, but it hasn't gone into that faux death, that fake death state where that chemical is released after the adrenaline, they'll eat that. But that's not a tried and true thing. That's not 100% even way. Animals will eat dead animals. Okay, but does it die naturally, or does it die because it has adrenaline and then it goes into the faux danger and then the animal won't eat it? Well, we've got that in us too. They haven't told us about that, but I've been studying it a lot. The freeze factor, the aspect. One guy I worked with that was beat up in a alley and left for dead, and he was afraid to move because he didn't know if they were still there or not. And his upset was that he froze. Not that he didn't fight or do anything, but they got the best. They clobbered him. He laid in the alley. He was down. He was bleeding, but he was still awake. And he was like, do something. But he froze. He couldn't do anything. His body, his unconscious mind was saying, no, screw you. We're going to protect you from getting killed. We're going to pretend you're dead or you're out. And he couldn't do anything. So his conscious mind was trying to be, I'm a brave guy. I'm a tough guy and everything. That was his trauma. His body had gotten over the trauma of being beat up. It didn't get over the trauma of him in the alley, laying there, froze, not being able to do what he wanted to do. And so I had to help him out of that. And it was funny because it was a seminar. Everybody was trying and nobody could do anything with it. And I said, come talk to me. And within a few minutes, he started screaming in the class like, yeah, okay, but I'm moving. And he got and the next day I came in and he goes, it's gone. And everybody's like, what'd you do to him? And I said, just figured out what was going on, with him and helped him out. Got him beyond that. That's why I love the coaching so much. I work with some veterans lately. I work with some people in traumatic situations, and to get them moving and unfrozen and living their life again, it's wonderful. But beyond that, beyond this life, what we think is this life is something else. So beyond the issues and the problems is something else. And I want to help introduce people to that. But that's not what this podcast is about. This is about telling you how you're stuck, how you're conditioned, how you're malleable. The greatest people you want to hypnotize are the ones that say, you can't hypnotize me. I can't be hypnotized. Well, that's a trance. That's a trance already. That's a belief. That's a hypnosis already that they're in. You could just work off that. You can work off their reverse psychology and put them in a trance through reverse psychology. They're so committed to reverse psychology. Well, you just take that pattern. Their brain is reversed. And they're saying, you can't do that. That's right, I can't do that. And you can't do this either. And you can't do that either. Well, they're polar responding you. And you can lead them into a certain way of thinking by that. This is how the culture works, the century of self. They took the 60s movement, and marketers sat there, Bernays and all these people, they're going like, okay, these kids, they're kind of like the Christians. They're really like, they've given up. We can't just let them sit there and turn people onto drug and this freedom of thought movement and everything like that. We got to hijack that. And they brilliantly did it. How did they do it? They made it into an identity. An identity. And once you're into an identity, that can be manipulated. So let's talk about identity real quick. What was the identity? They're free, loving people. Free, loving people. Let's have a gas-saving car so you can be free-loving, take care of your environment. The Volkswagen Bug. And all of a sudden, all the hippies are driving Volkswagen Bug. They wear these kind of clothes. They wear this kind of clothes. And all of a sudden, the hippies weren't there anymore. What happened to all the hippies? Now, I'm up in Shasta. There's some faux hippies up here now, people they don't have the original thinking. I mean, I was here in 90, and now it's 2015, and these kids are totally different than the well-educated hippies that were here before. They had a whole different way about them, so it's a different thing. But where are they? Where are they all? What they did is the Century of Self videos will show you how they brought them into a classical way of thinking. Well, now that I've got you driving the VW, the real thing is VW is owned by this other company, Porsche, and you can be you made a little bit of money. Yeah, you're not a total hippie. You're back into a yippie now. And so they turned the hippies into the yippies, and it wasn't hard then to turn the yippies into people that create Starbucks and go to Starbucks and drive Priuses. But they're still in the system. So they took, which was the antisocial, and brilliantly, may I say, ingenious, wicked genius, hijacked their value system into being back into a consumer capitalist, but did it in a way that made them feel like they were doing the right thing. Liberalism, communism, hijacked into this movement that is basically a fascist type movement. And you may not agree with me. I don't care. But just watch. Just sit around and watch. You're going to see a show unlike anything you've seen on Earth before that's coming up based on where this is going, based on not only what's happening to more than half of America, but the other countries around the world that it's scaring the crap out of. It's not that kind of freedom that they're concerned about. It's the pushing of that and how they're pushing it and what's the end result of it, that now the people that basically allowed that, you couldn't do this in a Muslim country. No, they'd have your head. They celebrated the other day by throwing 4 gays off the top of buildings, poor souls. So while everybody's celebrating here, ISIS says, okay, you want to celebrate this? You think this is a good thing? Here's how we'll celebrate. And then they killed 4 gay people by dropping them off buildings. And if they didn't die when they fell off the building, they stoned them to death. So the rest of the world isn't so gleeful and happy as we think we are here in America. They see this not just as a gay rights issue, but now they're going to start pushing that on America. Russia does not like this idea of what we're going to do in the name of freedom and liberalism that Obama's doing in Ukraine and saying that's on our doorstep. You're a little too close. You're pushing a little too hard. And they're talking nuclear war. But what is it they're talking about that they're not angry at American conservatives? You know what I mean? Maybe some of the neocons and people that are the rhinos, Republicans in name only. They're not real Republicans. They're not real conservatives. But the left likes to label them as that, so the people on the left will hate and dislike the other conservatives that really have more in common with them probably than anybody. They want to be left alone. They want to leave everybody else alone, and they want the ability to do what they want to do. But it's the extremes of the systems that we have to worry about. But the Russians are talking nuclear war because of this push. What happened with Pussy Riot, the liberal group that went over there, and with feminism and everything, they're like, no, we're not ready for that. And if you try to push it on us, we will go to nuclear war. You don't believe me? Do a little research into it. Study it a little bit. Listen to this Alexander Dugin. He may be Putin's #1 mentor, closest to his ear. Listen to what he has to say. He may be the most evil man in the world, but it behooves you to listen to what this man has to say. Anyways, I'm here at 49 minutes. I haven't even cracked that book. I'm sorry, and I'm not sorry, because this is all leading up to the book. So I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to end it here, and I will continue to talk and go right into the book so you can listen to, this is part 2, so you'll go into, no, this is part 3, so you'll go into part 4, which will be, I'll just start off reading the book. I think I got everything I wanted to do as a framework and as some priming to have you have an open mind and have an understanding of what I'm about to read to you and how it works. So for this, it's Mark J. Ryan. I'll let you go for this session, and I'll take a drink of water, take a few-minute breather, and be right back with opening the book and starting right from there. Thanks for being patient with me. Take care. Talk to you soon.